Okay, thank you, Dr. Thomas. Hello, everybody. It is so wonderful to see you, and I'm excited to share some information about burnout and stress and how we can sustain success, performance, and well-being. And so let me start with a question. When was the last time you felt the best version of yourself? So I'm not talking about productivity or effectiveness or getting your to-do list done, but when you felt patience, when you were truly present, when you were cognitively, mentally clear and energized, and when you felt connection to others. So with my work, I work with high-performing leaders, organizations, exceptional high school and college students and parents. And what I have been seeing more and more is increased irritability, more detachment, exhaustion. Many of us may be caring less, even for those that we care most about. And I know and I've seen that it's not because they lack resilience or because they don't care or try. And definitely it's not because they're lazy. It's because they're depleted, exhausted, emotionally, physically, mentally just spent. And the scary part is I'm seeing that this is being normalized, right, by individuals, by organizations, by our society. It's almost like a badge of honor that we carry around for being busy. We call it commitment or grit or getting it all done, maybe even being a leader. But sometimes what I believe that I'm really seeing is burnout. So today I'm going to share some information about stress and burnout, but I am not going to tell you to be more resilient or to buy a better planner so you can manage your time better. But we're going to do a deep dive into stress and burnout to make sure we understand what it is and what it isn't, and how it affects some of the best people and what organizations and individuals can do about it. So we're going to start with some basic understanding. So you see this beautiful bell curve here. And if you think about the x-axis, the line that goes across the bottom, is the level of stress. So as you go from left to right, it's low stress, higher stress, and lower stress. And then on the y-axis, on the left side going up, is performance, whether that performance, relationships, emotions. And so again, we have this curve where it goes from low to high. So if we look at this curve, what we see at the very beginning is no stress, very low stress. But if you look at the curve behind that visual, we see that performance, well-being, engagement with others is also low. I know I often think, man, I would love to have just no stress, be on the beach with a drink and an umbrella, and that would be the life. But number one, we know that's not realistic. We have stress in life. Just you waking up this morning and being here today started a cascade of neurochemicals that causes stress. We need a little bit to even just get up and exist in the world. And number two, if we are engaged with people, with work, with community at all, there is going to be stress. So even though it seems ideal, we know that in particular with low stress, that oftentimes we may lack meaning and purpose in life. So we're going to add a little bit of stress. And some of you are like, Kimberly, why in the world would you ever say that we're going to add stress? But we are, because what we get to then is a place called eustress. And eustress is really optimal in terms of engagement, meaning, productivity, performance, right? It gives us enough stress to really be able to do well, perform well. So when I was getting ready for this presentation, I had a little bit of stress, but that allowed me to then worry and care about what I was going to present, how I was going to say it, what readings and research would I look at to make sure that this was accurate. So eustress is optimal in terms of enough stress to get us going, and you can see the curve behind it. It allows us to perform at our peak. Now, if we go beyond that, however, we come to an area often known as distress, right? The stress, remember, on that bottom axis is extreme. And when we have extreme stress, particularly for prolonged periods of time, this is the place where we may find burnout. And so understanding that stress is not the enemy, that we need some in our life, zero is not realistic, and extreme, prolonged, chronic stress can be harmful to us. And so let's continue with a few more terms before we even jump into burnout. So we're going to define some of these terms so that we're all on the same page, and it really will become key to how we manage stress and how we avoid burnout. So the first one here is stressors, stressors or stressors. So these are things on your to-do list, right? It is the traffic, it is the kids, it's the dog needs to go to the vet, it's taxes, it's traffic. So I'm going to give you about 2 seconds to make your list of what are stressors in your life. Okay, so 2 seconds I know is not enough for you to list all your personal stressors, but it's important to highlight the stressors. Number one, don't end, right? To be alive, as I already said, you're going to have stressors. And that when we address the stressors, it does not mean that we have addressed the stress. So just because I go through that to-do list and I check off, I did that, I did that, I did that. I don't know if you've ever done this, but have you ever done something, it wasn't on your list, so you put it on your list so that you can cross it off, right? Because it just feels good to say, oh, I got that done. And that is important to get that list done, to take care of others, to take care of our business. I'm not saying we want to or should get rid of stressors, but just because we take care of those stressors, it does not mean necessarily that we have taken care of the stress. They are two different systems and they require two different approaches. So that's the first term, stressors. Now, when we have stressors, we then experience stress. So this is this heightened pressure. It can come from many different places, but often stressors will create this experience of stress. Now, another key term here is perception. How we regard and understand what we're going through or how we interpret it is really critical. So if I said right now, this young man is getting kicked out, he's getting expelled from school, you may have some empathy or just, see it as a headline. But if I said your child is getting kicked out of school, then that makes it different, right? This perception of what is happening lands differently. We respond differently to it. If I said, oh, that person who's worked at this organization for 12 years was just passed over for a promotion, we may have, again, some empathy and understanding and, oh, that's too bad. But if I said you were passed up for this promotion that you worked so hard for, that perception of that experience and what is happening makes it land differently. Well, the research says it's the same for stress, that our perception of stress is going to impact how we accept it, perform, address it, and what happens to us. So this is the one area I'm going to give you some data in terms of this perception or reframing of stress. Let me tell you these stories. They're pretty amazing, and they give you the science behind what I'm saying. So we see Keller and team, what they did was they asked hundreds of people, how much stress do you experience? And do you think that it's going to hurt you in terms of health? So we had, yes, I have a lot of stress, and yes, it's really bad for me. We had another group, I had a lot of stress, but it's not harmful. Then we had the people with lower stress. Oh, I have very low stress and it's harmful. I have very low stress and it's not harmful. So here's what they found, that those who had high stress raised the risk of premature death. And so what these researchers had to do was watch them over years to see who would die. It's kind of a interesting research for sure. And what they found was those who had high stress and believed that it was harmful to them had a higher probability of dying earlier, right? So just the belief that this is harmful to me increase the physiological outcomes, in this case, even death, for those who experience stress. In this study, they found those who had a lot of stress but did not believe it was harmful to them actually had lower rates of premature death than those who had low stress. So it's not the high stress that was physiologically harming these research subjects. It was the belief in that stress would be harmful. The second one here from Jamison, they would bring in students, and right away they say, you are on stage, you are giving a 5-minute impromptu presentation. And for most of us, that stress would increase. The stressor of giving a public presentation without practice would increase that stress. Now, what they did also was that they had researchers in the audience, and these researchers would roll their eyes, or they'd act like they were bored, or one would be like, come on, hurry, hurry. Like they wanted to increase the stressors in this situation. So one group of students just get on stage, do this. The other group of students, they actually gave them a class first where they helped change their perception about stress. They learned the science of stress. They learned the science that stresses actually can help us in performance, that use stress. They were able to reframe the stress. When your heart beats because you're stressed out, it's actually sending blood to your brain so you remember what you were going to say for that presentation. It's sending blood to your muscles so you can get on stage and dance, or get on the track and run. They just shifted their understanding and they reframed what stress meant. And then for all of the students, they took some physiological responses, the cardiovascular responses. They looked at the blood veins to see if they constricted. Typically, when we're under stress, it constricts, which means the heart has to pump harder, and that's why stressors can be bad for our bodies. What they found was the students who had that class to reframe stress, their physiological response, their biological response barely shifted. In other words, they were less likely to have these negative physiological consequences of those stressors and their experience of stress. Their perception made that physiological difference, because we know over time that cardiovascular response can impact our health. The last one I'll share here is from Poland and their team. And what they found was that when we are stressed, we knew before, but we release a lot of neurochemicals. Often we have heard of cortisol as a stress hormone, but what they also found was we release oxytocin. And if you're familiar with that, people know it as the love or the cuddle hormone, right? It is a chemical that's released when we are connected with others, when we have a good hug, when we pet our dog. It's a social hormone. And what they found was when we're stressed, we release this social hormone, which is also a stress hormone, which then drives us to others. And so when we are stressed, we have this natural response to go to other people. And so they found the group of people who would volunteer, or who would have regular social engagements with others. They would reach out to others when they were under stress, actually had better physical health, had better resiliency, cognitive strength, focus, and they had better relationships. So the science shows that just by understanding that stress, yes, can be harmful, absolutely, and yet our perceptions of what it does and how we can use it can make all the difference. So the other term I wanted to highlight here before we dive directly into burnout is what's known as the stress response. So this is what happens to you physically, cognitively, when you experience the stress from the stressors in your life. Right, so for some, it's like these tight shoulders, maybe the clenching of the jaw, or your dentist is saying you're grinding your teeth, right? Or it's the forgetfulness. For me, I get a bit more clumsy when I'm really, really stressed out. So it's the physical and cognitive responses to stress. And so with all these terms, I have one more that's important, since we understand stressors, stress, our perception, and then what happens to us cognitively and physically. And the other term I want to highlight here is the stress response cycle. So this is actually what happens when there's threat, when there's a stressor, what actions we take, and then what it signals to our body. And I'm going to review here. Remember, just taking care of the stressor doesn't mean we've taken care of the stress. Right? I do my to-do list, I go to bed, I wake up, and I do it again. What the stress response cycle requires of us is that we do something to then signal to our body that we are safe, we can return to normal, I can rebuild and sustain my performance, my well-being, so I can get up tomorrow and do it again. Right. So let me give you an example, a quick story here. So imagine that we were a tribe and we lived on the savannah. So I am out one day and I'm walking across the savannah and I see this thing. So what do you think I'm going to do? Yes, exactly. I'll probably scream, but then here I go. I start taking off. So I'm running and I'm running and I'm coming back to our tribe and coming back to our village. And I say, oh, Dr. Thomas, oh my gosh, help, help. And I run and I run and I run into her hut where she is with her family. And we close the door. And I'm looking out through the slats and I see that you all, as our villagers and my family, you come out and you kill the lion. So then I just jump up and down. I might start crying. I hug Dr. Thomas and her family. And I'm like, oh, I'm alive. Thank goodness I'm alive. All right. So this is an example of the stress response cycle. The lion is the stressor. I have a response. I'm going to take off. I'm going to run. And when that stressor is complete, because you all saved the day, then I jump up and down. I cry. I hug. I've completed that stress response cycle. I didn't look out, the lion was dead, and I just come strutting out like, everything's fine, no problem, right? The important piece, the stressor was done, but then I do things to then bring my body back to homeostasis, to rebuild the energy ready to face that next stressor. All right, so with all that baseline, now let's dive into defining burnout. So burnout has been studied for many decades. You can see here from Fraudenberger that it was since the 70s, and the research continues in this area. The one thing I want to highlight with the footnote here at the bottom is that it is a term that I am noticing that's often overused. It's kind of simplified. Everyone's burned out. Everyone is stressed out. Everyone is just like overwhelmed. I'm not denying that. But when it comes to the actual clinical definition of burnout, that may not be what we're seeing. That true burnout can be extreme enough that clinical intervention may be needed. I know physicians who have had to be hospitalized, who are on medication, who continue therapy, the importance of understanding the extreme really impact on us if we're truly burnt out. But you may meet one of these criteria, one of the three I'm going to show you, and not be burnt out. You may experience all of them and may truly be burnt out. But let's define those here. The very first category or definition that we would use for burnout is emotional exhaustion. So emotional exhaustion really is a core component or a warning sign of burnout. It's characterized by deep draining of energy, chronic fatigue, feeling overwhelmed by daily demands. And that it, as we said before, it's from prolonged stress. It is a physical, emotional, mental state where we are just depleted, right? The thing that typically we could handle, the one thing that your kid does that, you can typically get through, when it happens now, you just lose it. Whether it's you yell, whether that you cry and break down. I envision like a glass where it's full of water, where it's even bubbled at the top. Just one more drop and it's just flowing over. Emotional exhaustion. The second one is depersonalization. And this is a part of burnout that is experienced as emotional numbness. It's cynicism. It's this detachment where you feel disconnected from yourself, from others, from your work. Even those that you love, it's almost like I couldn't care less anymore, right? You are detached from that. It acts as a defense mechanism for all the stress that's being experienced. And the third part of burnout is this decreased sense of accomplishment. It's like no matter what I do, it's not enough. I envision a treadmill. I'm on the treadmill, I'm going, and it just keeps ramping up, and I'm going faster and faster and faster, and I just cannot keep up. So those are the three factors, parts of the definition of burnout. And so I'll highlight here, it is, again, the end state of long-term chronic stress. And interestingly, the World Health Organization has classified it as an occupational phenomenon. So in other words, it's from the environment, it's from work, it's from culture, it's from all the things that happen around us, and that it's the conditions of the workplace and all the places that we work. And it is not an individual disorder. So some of you may be familiar with the DSM. It's a diagnostic manual of individual disorders. Burnout is not in that manual. It's not an individual failure. It is the result of this environment, workplace conditions, and this long-term chronic stress. All right. So with all of those definitions, I'll just pause for a moment because I know that's a lot and let you reflect. So now let's jump into, okay, what do we do about all this, Kimberly? Great, we understand, we have a common understanding, stress response cycle, what is burnout? Maybe it's being overused, the term itself. So now what do we do with it? So in terms of managing burnout and managing stress to help avoid burnout, there are two approaches. I'm going to highlight the organizational approach first. Oftentimes I'll get invited by organizations to come in because leaders will say, my people are burnt out, I need you to help them. Sometimes the secret code there is I need you to fix them because we need our work done and it's not happening because we have extreme burnout here. And what I highlight to these leaders is, yes, we as individuals can do things to manage the stress, but I will share the World Health Organization definition. It's an occupational phenomenon. So we need to look at what's happening in the workplace and what you are doing as a leader. And sometimes that puts them on their heels of saying, wait a minute, I'm responsible. Like, yeah, there's some responsibility in there. I'm going to highlight this article. It was published 2 days ago by Gallup. And it looks at employee well-being and productivity. So when again, leaders say, I need them to work better, to do better, we've got deadlines, we've got our bottom line. I'm like, okay, let's also look at the workplace. And you can see here, it costs workplaces billions of dollars, burnout does. And so the importance of understanding that organizations have a responsibility when their employees are experiencing burnout. I'll give you, to me, a silly example, but really a critical example. Amazon had what they called Amazon, right? So these were these booths, like the old telephone booths, where workers who worked in the factory and on the line could go in, take a break, go into the Amazon booth, and they would hear music, they would see beautiful videos, they had a lot of great light and plants and a chair so that people could feel like they were in a different place, transformed into a different place. And what they found was that it did not decrease their stress, and it actually increased their cynicism. Right? So, oh, great, I just go into this booth and then I can feel better and I get back out and work. And what they found was that they actually got back out and the environment was the same. So it was like, oh, maybe I had a dip in just relaxing, but then I went back into the workplace and it was the same, right? And Amazon spent millions of dollars on these booths that just frankly failed, right? So this article calls it care washing. Organizations are just doing quick, let's check the box, let's get these people well, and get them back on the line, and that it is not working well, and so it would take a deeper dive. So I just give that to say we could spend a whole hour on this, and organizations have some responsibility in that. And so it's important for leaders to understand that the conditions of the workplace, right, the workload, the fairness of how work is assigned, how awards and acknowledging what workers do, the importance of people feeling connected to the work, feeling connected to each other. Having a best friend at work makes a difference. Feeling that their work matters is really critical, and that is on our organizations to create these systems and these policies in the workplace that will help address that. So with that, where we have some control as individuals can also help in terms of managing stress and avoiding burnout. Remember, we may not control all the stressors that come our way, but that we can do and perform to make that difference. And so the health and performance, our health and performance really depends on oscillating between stress and recovery. The need for stress, which we covered, eustress, and the need for recovery will allow us to continue in terms of sustaining performance, increasing well-being, having a sense of meaning and purpose. And so I'm going to go into a few of these here as we head to the end of our time together that we can do as individuals. Now, this is backed again by science and research that says here are some ways that we can manage stress to help avoid getting to the point of burnout. So one of the ways I'll highlight is to move your body. Just to move. And that doesn't have to be a rigorous gym, 30 minutes a day, although you can if you can, but it can be dancing. It can be walking. It can be going to the playground and playing Lava Monster with your child, right? It's anything to just help move your body. And if we were in session together, we would do an exercise where we would move. So I'm going to encourage you right now just to tighten all the muscles in your body, hold it for a couple seconds, and release. Right? So this physiological shifting of the neurochemicals, the physiological moving of the body can help to address stress that builds up in our body. The next practice that I'll highlight is positive social interaction. Right? Really, when I was being chased by that lion, I didn't go alone to my own little hut. I went to my friends, I went to my peers, and I said, help, help, right? This going towards our people is one of the best ways to help avoid burnout and to address that stress that tends to build up in the body. Another one that I'll highlight is affection. The Gottmans are researchers out of the University of Washington, and they've done the math on this, and they say a 20-second hug. Now, 20 seconds, if you were in a room and I said, turn to your partner and give a 20-second hug, which I've done often, people in the audience are a little bit freaked out. Like, that's a little uncomfortable, 20 seconds. But what the Gottmans found was it, again, released, right? It just shifted the body to say, I am safe, right? Stressors are still there, or I just finished that stressor, but I am safe. Right? In my lion example, I hugged Dr. Thomas and her family, and my body said, okay, you are fine, you are safe. I have one daughter and one friend. When they give me that hug and they hold on longer than I typically would, they hold on, I feel that shift in my body. The Gottmans highlight also, it's a 6-second kiss. So obviously not doing this at work typically, a lot of consent is needed. But when your sweetheart gives you a peck on the cheek and then takes off for the day, you could say, come back, come back. It's the Gottmans. We've got to do it for 6 seconds, right? And how good that is for us. Okay. The next one I'm going to highlight is laughter. Not just the sending a LOL because your dad sent a dad joke. It is the belly crunching, cramping muscles, laughter, maybe even tears coming down your face. Again, the release of the emotions, the cognitive stress, the physical muscle tension that can come from laughter. The seeming like the opposite, but can work as well, is that good old cry. I don't know about you, but have you ever had that ugly, ugly cry mascara running down your face, and afterwards you're just like, whew, I just feel better. The stressor is still there, the deadline's still tomorrow, the kids are still not listening, but somehow I just shifted to feel a little better. Stressors are separate from this process of working through our stress. So that good cry, right? When you all killed the lion, tears running down my face, I'm jumping up and down, I'm hugging my friends, the processing of that stress response. And then one other, there are many others, but I decided to add this one, creative expression. That it might be poetry, it might be art, it might be woodworking, right? Like how can you be creative and express this other part of yourself? And the research shows that creative expression for many can be a great way to process the stress response and complete that stress response cycle. Now, I'm going to highlight here, creative expression does not work for me. When my friends say, let's go paint and sip, I'm like, oh no, increase in stress. Because I don't know if the moon's big enough or if that blue was bright enough. Like, it just does not work for me. And I highlight this because just because research says it's so, right, here's the data, here's the research, here's the citation for the article, may not mean that it's so for you. And there's a giddy term going around that says you've got to do the me search on the research. So you may say, no, moving my body because of my body and because of where I'm at is not going to reduce stress. So then don't do it, no matter how much the research says that, or find a different way to move that might help you with that. Pro-social interaction, I put the positive in there because social interaction can increase stress depending on who it is and what you do, right? So that positive. And so these are some ways to manage the stress, complete the stress response cycle, but you have to see what works for you. All right. So after I do presentations or even in class with my students, we will do an aha. An aha is something that you learned, something that you take away, something that you're going to implement for yourself to help with this stress response cycle, to help avoid burnout. It's if your mom calls and says, oh, you did this on a Saturday morning, what did you learn? And because we're not live, I'll say, here's a few that I hope that I would hear in the room. Number one, stress itself is not necessarily bad, okay? But stress without recovery can be harmful. We know chronic stress, long-term stress can be, but this process of recovery can help in many cases and most of the time. Number two, burnout is an occupational phenomena. And the workplace system, the systems and processes have to be examined. So it is not just on us as individuals, but the environments and the systems that we live in that have some responsibility and some power in making a difference for us. Number three, that we can complete the stress response cycle to help us to sustain success, performance, and well-being. So not that we are broken if we become burnt out, but along the way with the stress, the stressors that we experience, what can we do to help ourselves and to help avoid burnout? And so with that, I am going to invite you to a 30-day energy recovery challenge. If you're interested, and you'll receive the QR code here in a minute, that it is a 30-day exercise and challenge where every day we will practice a new behavior that will help in regards to not only processing the stress response and getting through that cycle, but really recovering from the stress that we experience and the stressors in our lives. We'll go through 5 different pillars of recovery and energy to help us recover and build energy in this challenge. I hope you will join. And with that, I am going to say thank you. Here's some contact information if you have questions, if you want to start a conversation, or if you want to sign up for my newsletter. Thank you so much. Be well.